behalf of the Mount Vernon Place Conservancy, we welcome all of you, all of our distinguished guests, to this very special ceremony.
The Washington Monument and Mount Vernon Place are the symbolic center of our city. This extraordinary public space is one of our ancestors' greatest legacies to the future of our city. It stands as a testament to Baltimore's ideal of national liberty and cultural self-determination.
The Conservancy is most honored to have been charged with the stewardship of this national cultural treasure.
The United States entered the war on April the 6th, 1917. America reluctantly entered the war to restore liberty and peace to the world after almost 3 years of unprecedented hardship, slaughter, and horror.
Just 1 month later, a remarkable event occurred on this very same place. This ceremony that brings us over today reminds us that almost exactly 1 century ago, on May 14, 1917, the groundbreaking for a statue of the Marquis de Lafayette took place here in Mount Vernon Place.
It's worth noting that on very short notice, 50,000 residents of Baltimore turned out for the groundbreaking ceremony for this beautiful monument and to welcome the French delegation.
That day, Baltimore showed its support for the French fighting for the national liberty. The Baltimoreans spoke for the whole country.
They did so here in Mount Vernon Place, in the shadow of the Washington Monument. Their choice was purposeful, as the monument not only serves as a memorial to the founder of our country, George Washington, but also as the first major monument to commemorate our new nation's independence. Independence the Marquis de Lafayette was instrumental in securing.
Americans in 1917 were much more mindful of our debt to France. France, who had been our steadfast ally during the blood and strife of the American Revolution. At a 4th of July ceremony following the arrival of first American combat troops in France, Captain Stanton, speaking on behalf of General Pershing, stated, "Lafayette, nous voilà." Lafayette, we are here. I know well the story of Yorktown, of Rochambeau, of de Grasse, and of course, the Marquis de Lafayette. But it was much later that I learned there were more troops fighting at Yorktown from France than from the American colonies.
After brief introductions at the base of the monument, with the settings awash with the American and French flags, and the playing of the American and French national anthems like today, the French emissaries paraded to the far end of the East Square and broke ground for the statue of Lafayette.
Today, 100 years later, we assemble here to remember a moment in history where America paid tribute to her oldest ally. Our nation entered the war in the age of the horse and wagon and ended that same war in armored vehicles and airplanes.
The First World War ushered in a new opportunities on the long road of social equality for African Americans and women, both whom actively participated.
It is our honor to commemorate the sacrifice made by the American soldiers, notably the contributions of the African American community to the war effort. The French toll was 1.4 million soldiers. This fact alone could explain why these commemorations are so important to us and why the Centennial of the US entry into the war is an invitation to remember the history we share with you.
Within weeks of this groundbreaking, Baltimore's cultural leaders determined that the location was not prominent enough for a statue of such historic importance, and the location was moved to where it is today. The squares were completely redesigned by the distinguished firm of Crerar and Hastings to give greater prominence to this new addition. From the axis of Charles Street, the main street of our city, Washington and Lafayette were meant to be seen together, just as they were paired together historically during the Revolutionary War. The statue arrived in 1924 and was dedicated on Lafayette's birthday.
President Poincaré said, in 1777, Lafayette, crossing the seas with French volunteers, came to bring brotherly help to the American people who were fighting for their national liberty. In 1917, France was fighting in her turn to defend her life and the liberty of the world. America, who had never forgotten Lafayette, crossed the seas to help France, and the world was saved. President Wilson added, Lafayette is immortal because he is a self-forgetful servant of justice and humanity, beloved by all Americans because he acknowledged no duty more sacred than to fight for the freedom of his fellow man.
We must work to preserve these treasured spaces. These visual symbols keep alive the ideals of a kind of democratic society that our ancestors fought and died to protect, and which we still must work hard to perfect.